There are over 6,000 marijuana farms, and authorities say at least half of those are operating illegally and have ties to Chinese organized crime.
It's about China's role in thousands of illicit marijuana grows nationwide.
Ties back to the Communist Party in Beijing.
Body, multiple bodies.
4 Chinese nationals all shot.
Sounds like you're talking about victims of human trafficking.
Yes.
How did the Chinese Mafia take over major portions of America's illicit pot trade? To understand this, we need to delve into the world where organized crime meets the burgeoning American cannabis market. Our journey begins with these Chinese triads, notorious for their deep-rooted influence in clandestine operations that have infiltrated both the legal and illegal cannabis trade in the United States.
And it's also going to licensed dispensaries, and that should be very alarming for everyone that's listening to this.
This story is not just about crime, but about culture, economics, and my personal history. This is The Shadows Over Green, the Triad's grip on American cannabis. Please don't forget to subscribe. More than 65%, I think maybe 70% of the views lately have been from folks not subscribed, which is wild. Also, don't forget to follow us on all the socials, especially Instagram. If you guys want to get access to content like this, plus we actually have a whole series of stories, some of the craziest kind of information in terms of the cannabis industry. If you're trying to really learn and really understand that inside baseball, I highly recommend you guys go and subscribe to our streaming platform. Go to www.highdesign.media. You can sign up for free. The paid version, though, is way better, I would say. There's a ton of content that's for the paid subscribers that you literally, trust me, it's crazy content, stuff that I would never dare release outside of it.
Have you heard of LMC?
What are you talking about?
Dr. Smoke.
Shout out to our homies over at Dr. Smoke. If you guys go to drsmoke.com, use my code LMC, you're gonna get 15% off your entire.
Okay, what is it? Let's go. You're crazy. Look at that.
I'm gonna order some right now.
Look at that. That's sweet heat platinum THCA flower for what?
They've got cookies.
We've got different products from all over the country.
Putting in our address.
All right, let's do it.
All
And then make sure, let's use LMC 15 right now.
Wait, what was that again?
LMC 15.
LMC 15.
We're gonna get 15% off, it looks like.
Oh, that makes it even better deals.
Let's go.
All right.
What? We got the 1.5 gram
On the
diamond
way.
infused pre-roll for
$7?
$5. No, it's got the discount on it.
You're right.
Holy shit.
$5.
Now, let's jump into the video, folks. You're not gonna want to miss this one. Strap in. Anyways, this is LMC. Let's run it. Since I was 14, I've been fascinated with this amazing plant. For around 10 years, I was involved in the distribution of this plant, working in and around old Washington medical markets throughout my high school years. Washington State legalized recreational cannabis in 2012 alongside Colorado, opening our legal rec industry at the end of 2015, the year that I ended up graduating high school. Now, the 3-year buffer period between 2012 and 2015 was a gray market in limbo with very little legal consequences. It was almost like a wild last hurrah of the highly unregulated OG medical markets of the West Coast. During my last couple years of high school, I had a medical card that allowed me to legally purchase, sell, and transport this plant to other medical card holders. I could sell to stores and buy from growers. My friends and I would use Craigslist to advertise our delivery services, supplying medical patients all across the city and beyond. And as you can imagine, the last few years of the medical market was a free-for-all, like I said. The state hadn't opened any recreational stores, so there's no tax money to collect and therefore zero enforcement. Now, Craigslist was a massive marketplace at the time for medical patients to connect and possibly make, quote, donations. Not only did I use Craigslist to advertise my delivery services, but also to connect with new growers and meeting dozens through these means. Some of my favorite growers happen to be Chinese. The prices were always competitive, the bag appeal of the flower was pretty on point, and the smell was decent. One thing that always stood out to me, though, was that the Chinese folks I worked with always had one strain for sale. It was the Bubba, which later became known as the Platinum Bubba OG, or some variation of that. See, business was always legit with them, and as long as you were good to them, they were good to you. And the 2 Chinese growers I worked with for almost 7 years, were great people. I actually ended up even buying cars off them and stuff. They'd sell me all their different cars, and I would do deals with that. Anyway, that's for another episode. But while their English was minimal and my Chinese was non-existent, we still communicated decently well. So over those 6, 7, 8 years, me and my friends purchased thousands of units from them. And little did we know, as time went on, I started to realize that the 2 Chinese growers I was working with were under the broad banner of the Triad, or the Chinese Mafia. I had no problem with that at the time, and for the most part, still don't. But as the years went by, I grew curious about the Chinese Mafia and their overall involvement with the illicit market in the US, and their massive effect on the public reputation of the Bubba strain, or Platinum Bubba OG. Looking back, I realized we were probably smoking bud that wasn't grown organically and likely had all kinds of bad stuff in it in terms of heavy metals and those kind of things. However, that wasn't the big reason why Bubba or Platinum Bubba OG became viewed negatively. The US had been flooded with the specific Platinum Bubba for years, dating back to the early 2000s and ramping up in the 2010s. Flooding markets with one type of strain does a lot of harm to the perception of that strain. Supply and demand affects prices and perceptions. Now, that last portion that I just read, well, that part was actually an excerpt from a video I put out almost 3 years ago. It's called How the Chinese Mafia Destroyed the Bubba Strains. And you can go check that out if you want to. I highly recommend anybody go watch that if they haven't seen that yet. It's one of my favorite pieces that I've ever done just because of my personal connection to it. But yes, I will say, I think I was one of the very first people to talk about this issue on YouTube and online really in general, which is interesting. You know, like I said, because I had that personal connection to it, it kind of became pretty apparent to me, especially as I started to look at the broader issues, starting to see this grow and become a phenomenon in other states.
In California,
Oklahoma, and
State of Maine.
Because it really started in Washington State and Colorado, right? Because that's where legalization started. Now, let's jump into the historical context of Chinese immigration and triads. Okay, so to understand the current landscape, we need to delve into the past. Beginning in the mid-19th century during the California Gold Rush and continuing with the building of the Transcontinental Railroad, the history of Chinese immigration to the United States is a story of aspiration and adversity. However, the migration patterns of the 20th century brought new waves of Chinese immigrants with different dreams and sometimes desperate circumstances. It was during these waves that the Triads would find new footholds in American soil.
Triad, and back then is a part of the environment in Hong Kong. We exposed in the very early age. And first time I drew blood, that was when I was 9.
And the town provided the community with a sense of belonging. It also allows them to have a sense of identity.
The Triads originated as secret societies, evolving into powerful syndicates navigating periods of political turmoil in China. With the rise of the communist power under Mao Zedong, many Triads fled to Taiwan. The nationalist government there utilized Triads to maintain martial law in the 20th century. And this relationship between governments and criminal organizations is not unique. The US worked with the mafia during World War II with Lucky Luciano. And then fast forward to the 1990s and, well, China's experienced an economic boom, and many Triad groups began to change their allegiance to the communist government due to massive economic incentives. But really the point I'm trying to hammer home here is that in a lot of ways, there's a lot of countries around the world that utilizes different organized crime groups to be kind of the government's second enforcement. There's a tie between many different governments and their underworld counterparts.
On several occasions that I wouldn't comment about the recent congressional hearings on the Iran-Contra matter.
Now, according to the report by the Department of Justice, Triad involvement in the U.S. expanded significantly during this time. They capitalized on the economic opportunities presented by the rapidly growing illegal drug trade, including cannabis. So the Triad's current operations in America are a reflection of past survival strategies and a response to modern opportunities. Their involvement in the cannabis industry is no accident. It's a calculated move. By capitalizing on states with favorable conditions for cannabis cultivation, such as loose regulations and high demand, the Triads have built a significant presence in the industry.
The allure of affordable land, inexpensive licenses, and lax laws combined for an irresistible recipe.
I think that was one of the draws, was being a rural community that could go undetected.
Just one flashpoint in a billion-dollar black market marijuana boom now sinking its teeth into less populated states like Oklahoma, Colorado, and Maine.
So they had irrigation systems set up, they had heating systems, humidifying systems. It was quite an impressive operation.
They employ advanced agricultural techniques often learned and perfected over generations. Now, the sophistication of their operations goes beyond agriculture, though. The Triad's strategic use of human trafficking networks supplies labor and complicates enforcement efforts. Many workers are reluctant to speak out due to fear of retribution or deportation, and these networks are notoriously difficult to dismantle, often operating under the guise of legitimate businesses, blending in and hiding in plain sight.
85% of these 100 homes that we're going to forfeit were sold by one real estate agent. Those wire transfers would then be put into an escrow account. They would go to a hard money lender to get the balance of the amount of money that was owed, and then they would buy the title through a straw purchaser.
A Homeland Security report highlighted how Chinese triads have used sophisticated methods to integrate their operations into local economies. For example, in 2017, authorities raided over 100 homes in Northern California, each a front for a massive multi-million-dollar illegal grow operation.
In Sacramento, the feds take a bite out of organized crime. Dozens of homes raided over the past 2 days in the Sacramento area. Investigators say that those homes were used as marijuana grow houses. The drugs would then be distributed across the country, particularly on the East Coast, we're told.
And these operations were heavily reliant on trafficked laborers, many of whom were smuggled into the country under the promise of legitimate work, only to find themselves trapped in a cycle of debt and exploitation.
I think one of the things that did strike me was the deplorable conditions that these people had to travel in. The fact that one entrepreneur would actually do this to human beings.
In some cases, the suspects arrested may have been victims.
We encountered 3 Asian males. They were being paid $1,000 a month to work 24/7.
Trapped inside sparse living quarters with blacked out windows.
Speaking through a Mandarin interpreter, 45-year-old Chen Wu appeared in a Miami-Dade court Wednesday morning, begging to be allowed to stay in South Florida.
If I go back to Oklahoma, I'm afraid that I will be killed because these people are mafias.
Now, these Chinese gangs involved in these operations also often employ workers sourced through Mandarin language ads, targeting immigrants who may be unaware of the legal implications. These workers are typically overworked and underpaid, sometimes under false pretenses. Investigations have uncovered that some workers were lured from places like Los Angeles to states like New Mexico and Oklahoma with promises of legitimate work only to find themselves in illegal and exploitative situations. The funding for these operations is believed to come from various sources, some potentially connected to organized crime syndicates such as the Triads. And these groups have a long history of involvement in illicit activities, including drug trafficking. There's also concern that some profits from these illegal farms may be funneled back to China, possibly benefiting entities with ties to the Chinese Communist Party.
Chinese gangs are expanding into the illegal marijuana business right here in America.
Last year, a leaked Homeland Security memo said that the proliferation of these illegal grow ops were connected to Asian transnational criminal organizations with possible ties back to the Communist Party in Beijing.
Now, the scale of these operations presents significant challenges for law enforcement. Authorities estimate there are around 270 illegal marijuana farms valued at over $4 billion, despite multiple busts. It's almost like the Hydra effect.
Do county sheriffs have the resources to bust up these Chinese gang-led grow operations, maybe funneling this money back to the CCP, or are you getting partnership with the feds, with the FBI and others?
I will tell you that we are overwhelmed. We don't have the resources. You know, this has gotten totally out of control. The black market is just exploded across the nation. What I can tell you, we're just struggling, even just to get the calls for service, taken care of, let alone a giant organized criminal enterprise that's sweeping the nation. So
the information we have says that there's over 200 that are actively working right now.
I like to describe Chinese organized crime as the flu virus because they're constantly mutating into different groups and different alliances, and therefore they're very difficult to investigate.
Now, local law enforcement agencies have often struggled with insufficient resources. Additionally, the interplay between state and federal laws complicate enforcement efforts massively. Now, marijuana remains illegal under federal law, and it's been just moved recently to a Schedule 3, which we'll talk about more in the future, but it still is creating a gray market, right, that illicit operators exploit, hampering consistent and effective regulatory oversight across states. As the Triad's cannabis farms spread across the American landscape, their impact resonates beyond the confines of hidden plantations to the very heart of local communities.
If I can go into Maine and buy a house for cheap that's rural, it's very isolated.
Population about 2,000.
It's sleepy.
Sleepy, very quiet.
But last fall, a pungent smell and a stream of vans darting to and from this barn woke up the neighbors.
These operations do not exist in a vacuum. They are often nestled with small towns and rural areas where the sudden influx of unfamiliar faces and secretive activities stir unease among local residents. And beyond unsettling the social fabric, the presence of these Triad-operated farms can lead to an increase in crime, strain local resources, and even affect property values.
These folks concerned about toxic fumes, water quality, and more.
And last year I had a big fish kill in my pond. Fish everywhere on the pond dead.
And perhaps the most profound impact is on the local cannabis market itself. With the ability to operate at lower costs, often due to illegal labor practices, these Triad farms can flood the market with cheap cannabis, undercutting legal growers who adhere to labor laws and tax regulations.
Shadowy underworld is undercutting business.
They don't have to follow the regulations we have to follow, and they don't have to pay the taxes that we have to pay. It hurts us.
This not only skews the market, but also discourages compliance with state regulations. And to the point about, just the price being a lot cheaper, I mean, this is why the Bubba packs, we call them work packs, right? They're the best packs to, utilize for best price, for best quality. And it was perfect for, selling a bunch of units. So I'll personally attest to that for sure back in the day. In Oregon, for instance, the local cannabis market has been significantly affected by the influx of illegally grown cannabis. A 2019 report from the Oregon Liquor Control Commission detailed how illegal operations were driving down prices.
Taggart showed us a shocking example of just how low prices are dropping here as Oregon's marijuana market deals with its lowest prices in its history.
This used to sell for anywhere from $50 to $80 a gram. We're now selling it for $18 a gram, tax included.
Making it nearly impossible for legal growers to compete. And this has led to increased tension within the community and has forced some legal operations out of business. Now, in recent years, states such as Oklahoma, which we've also done a whole video about, so check that out if you get the chance as well. But in recent years, states such as Oklahoma, California, Oregon, and Maine have experienced a dramatic increase in illegal marijuana farms linked to Chinese gangs. This trend is particularly troubling in states where marijuana has been legalized, as these illicit operations often undermine regulated markets, like we mentioned earlier. In Oklahoma, for instance, around 3,000 of the nearly 7,000 licensed marijuana farms have been flagged for suspicious activities.
About half of the state's 6,400 operators are currently under investigation.
Each time we've hit one of those farms, it's really a smaller part of a much bigger investigation because that farm is oftentimes tied to 40 to 400 other farms in Oklahoma, which are all being run by a higher up group of people that are moving the plants, moving the workers, and more importantly, making the money disappear.
Shockingly, about 75% of these flagged farms are connected to Chinese groups. Crazy to think about. Now, let's go a little bit more into some of the complexities of the Triad influence, and it extends into the cultural enclaves of Chinatowns across America. These neighborhoods, vibrant with cultural heritage and community, also serve as strategic bases for Triad operations. See, Chinatowns offer a facade of familiarity, security, and where Triads can operate under the guise of community solidarity. Yet beneath the surface, these are sometimes centers directing the flow of illegal cannabis or anything else illicit. At the end of the day, like I said, think about this. I've been told that there's secret Chinese police stations around the United States that, are utilized by the CCP.
The FBI says the station was a hub of Chinese counterintelligence operations in New York City, used to harass and intimidate dissidents who dared to defy China.
The secret police station appears to have had a more sinister use.
Officials say Liu allegedly tracked down and terrorized a pro-democracy activist living in California.
The cultural dynamics of these communities often discourage cooperation with law enforcement, compounded by language barriers and a mistrust of authorities. This creates the perfect storm, allowing Triad activities to flourish largely unchecked. The networks established in these communities are vital in coordinating the logistics of cultivation, distribution, and even the international smuggling of workers and resources necessary for these large-scale operations.
Some of the people have been brought here from China under the auspices that they're working under a legit business.
It sounds like you're talking about victims of human trafficking.
Yes.
According to a 2020 report from the Brookings Institution, Chinatowns across the United States have been key nodes in the distribution networks of the Triads. These areas provide the cover needed for the triads to operate effectively, often utilizing legitimate businesses as fronts for their illicit activities. And the integration into these communities make it challenging for law enforcement to penetrate and dismantle these operations. Now, as we've seen, the impact of Chinese triads on the American cannabis industry is profound and multifaceted. Looking forward, the challenge for policymakers and law enforcement is not just to curb these illegal activities, but to understand and address the underlying factors that fuel them. With cannabis legalization spreading across more states, the opportunities for illicit operations also grow. However, this also provides a unique opportunity to reshape the market to ensure better outcomes for all stakeholders. The involvement of Chinese gangs in the U.S. cannabis market is not just a criminal issue, but also a potential national security concern. Some lawmakers fear these operations could be part of a broader strategy by the Chinese Communist Party to exert influence in the United States. Although there's no conclusive evidence directly linking the CCP to illegal activities, the possibility of such connections cannot be entirely ruled out given the complex relationship between the Chinese government and organized crime. Furthermore, the presence of these illegal operations impact local communities and legal cannabis businesses like we've been saying. Residents near these farms often report issues such as strong odors and increased criminal activity, degrading the quality of life in affected areas. And legal cannabis operators also suffer as they are forced to compete with cheaper, illegally grown marijuana that does not adhere to regulatory standards, including safety and quality controls. Effective change requires a multifaceted approach, strengthening the community police relations, improving regulations and oversight of cannabis markets, and providing support for legal growers are all critical. Additionally, international cooperation to tackle human trafficking must be intensified. As we move forward, the goal should be not only to disrupt these illegal networks, but also to rebuild trust within the affected communities, and ensuring the cannabis industry can grow sustainably and beneficially for everyone involved. A 2021 report by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime emphasized the need for international collaboration in tackling the transnational nature of triad operations,
presenting criminals with new opportunities to exploit the marginalized and at risk. International cooperation through the convention and its protocols on human trafficking, migrant
and this
smuggling.
is the thing about the triad. The triad are very, very hard to get rid of because they're a decentralized system, right? There's no head boss of all of the triads, really. And it's also, like I said, at the end of the day, like, if it's not the triad, then it's going to be other groups. But if you look at the history of China getting conquered by the UK, the United Kingdom, or the Empire of Britain back in the 19th century, they did that through a number of different mechanisms. One of the mechanisms, though, that was utilized was getting a lot of the men, able-bodied men that were potentially able to fight, getting them addicted to opioids, or getting them addicted more so to opium. That's why they called the Opium Wars of, I think, like 1911 or like 18 something. I can't remember the exact dates on it, but that's one of the things. And we see a lot of this fentanyl now coming through the southern border. Now, this is very different from cannabis, but if you start to look at it, China has successfully taken over large swaths of the overall illicit trade in America.
Are expanding, particularly in rural parts of the U.S., and they're finding surprising backers overseas who are tied to other deadlier drugs, including fentanyl.
Yes, the Mexicans in other countries are still going heavy on it. It can't be denied that the Chinese underworld has taken a significant amount of power. And that's, like I said, is that a bad thing? Probably. Definitely a bad thing. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say because it's like, would it be better if the Americans controlled the underworld more or not? I don't know. That's it. But I do think that there is a worry. We have to be a little more worried about foreign actors. Anyways, let me know what you guys think. So in conclusion, Shadows Over Green has taken us through a journey from the dark corners of illegal cannabis markets to the brighter paths of potential reform and community resilience. The story of cannabis in America is still being written, and each chapter offers a chance for learning, action, and improvement. If you guys have any comments, let me know down below. I would love to hear from you. Anyways, guys, really appreciate you guys for watching this video. Please make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, comment down below, share this with your friends. Anyways, this is LMC, signing out.